Hey everyone, I'm back for another matchup review VOD. This was initially supposed to be Green Post, and then the Mirror. Unfortunately, Magic the Gathering Online had a pretty big hiccup this week that required everyone to reinstall Magic Online, and unfortunately, that meant all replays are gone. So I'm only working with a few days worth of matches, so I'm kind of didn't have a lot of selection to choose from. So based on the matchups I saw in the Mana Traders event and just a couple of league matches this week, the one that came up the most frequently was Karn Echo. So this deck's been performing pretty well throughout the year. It has its ebbs and flows just like anything else, but it's top 8 two of the showcase events. It was in the top 8, maybe might have even been in the finals of the challenge 2 weeks ago, and also it finished second in the Dice City Games / Lotus Box / Anzi Invitational. That was about 2 weeks ago too. So the deck shows up. That's extremely powerful. This copy right here is an older list. Well, older, like 10 days ago from the challenge a couple weekends ago. But it's likely to see a significant update in the form of Hull Breacher, and some of the matchups we will be covering do in fact have Hull Breachers. So I'm not exactly sure which slots get swapped around, and there hasn't been a posting that I've seen of anything yet to really rely on. So we'll just look at the stock list from about a week and a half ago, and we'll see the Hull Breachers in some of the matches. So this deck is extremely explosive. It's able to mulligan relatively aggressively because it has the LED Echo of Eons reset button. So if they know you're on depths, or any non-blue deck really, they have the option of any hand that has Echo LED. They can just play out whatever zeros they have, get a land drop, and reset their hand and force mulligan you, which is just a really strong ability, especially on the play. They're a Chalice deck, so you can get punished hard if you keep having 1 casting cost hands. The Planeswalkers are extremely powerful. Narset sets up both ends of the LED Echo, on top of being able to just find something like a Karn against us and Turbo Depth Shells in general. In game 1, there's no real answer to Karn fetching an Ensnaring Bridge and putting it into play, short of like them having uncastables stuck in hand and hitting in with some like Hex Mages or something like that, but that's just extremely unlikely. So if we aren't able to kill them, the turn Karn comes down. Usually Bridge locks us out in game 1, so that's an extremely strong effect against Depth Shells. Another extremely problematic card is Psy Master Thopterist, which, with any kind of ability to chain any of their artifacts, is just going to make a continuous stream of 1/1 colorless blockers that Sejiri Step can't push through. So a Psy by itself isn't necessarily game over, but a Psy with something like an active Emery and a 0 that they can sacrifice any of the baubles or any of the petals is just, it's going to be a massive headache. There's some workarounds, but it's just really strong if that hits play and they have an unchecked engine. So the sideboard is relatively, I don't think it's particularly good against depths. They have some forces that could come in. Some players choose to do that. I don't think forces are particularly great against us. Most of the one-ofs they want to leave in the sideboard for Karn to fetch. So, Bridge is generally there. They could choose to bring in Spyglass. Mystic Forge probably comes in because that's just another bomb that a lot of Depth Shells have a hard time answering outside of Force of Vigor. I mean, you can needle it, but the primary effect still is functioning during that. So all in all, it's a really strong shell with a lot of powerful effects, and it's a deck we probably should be used to or plan on seeing. So we'll just go through some games, and hopefully there's some useful information in here. Okay, so in this first game, we're on a mull to 6. This is in the dark, so I do not know the opponents on Karn Echo. This hand's fine. It's a turn 3 combo. It's not great because it doesn't have disruption, but it's likely better than a random 5. So I just keep this hand and bottom a city. It's probably don't need 2 pain lands. The Gemstone Mine's only going to need to tap once or twice to combo, so we should be fine from there. So the opponent's deck is pretty obvious right off the bat. Seat of Synod's a pretty big giveaway. So they go Seat into Petal into Emery. So one thing you really want to be conscious of when Emery hits the table is the specific cards that hit the yard and what that means for the game going forward. So in this case, they brick entirely, but knowing what the mana situation is and knowing if they have a draw engine with any of the baubles and just being aware of what can come back is just always something you should look out for. Here, the main thing that they're going to be able to do is loop Lotus Petal. So worst case scenario, they can use a Lotus Petal twice in any given turn. So they also have a Mox Opal and a second Mox Opal and a second Lotus Petal into a turn 1 Karn the Great Creator, which grabs an LED and puts an LED. So ordinarily, Karn can just get bridge and lock us out in game 1, but on this particular board state, they're just going to be able to lattice lock us on turn 2 just by looping the LED back with the Emery. So from here, really the only out we have is to draw either basically either a Pithing Needle to name Karn or a Stifle to get it to go down to 1 loyalty and then hope to top deck out of it. There are other scenarios where we could have, say, Lotus Petal and any of these lands or an Urborg where we could play a Hex Mage and remove the counters from the Karn. But in this case, we just don't have an answer. So from here, they're either just going to lattice lock us or bridge us, and either way, that's just a straight losing position. So since we don't have anything, I think that's just a straight concession point. So one thing that will come up a lot is these games are fairly play draw dependent in game 1. Like, they have a lot of explosive starts. When we're on the play, all of our discard is definitely live. We don't have to worry about it being jousted on turn 1, those sorts of things. So there is a little bit of that to it. And once you know the matchup, this is definitely the kind of matchup where mulligan decisions matter a lot. We have to have a distinctive plan, something that's either extremely explosive, like a turn 2 combination, making a 20/20, or multiple pieces of disruption, something that we know is going to be able to combat the explosiveness of their deck. Hands that are like Urborg, Depth Stage, and a Needle just aren't going to work. That's not going to be good enough, because if they have 3 to 4 turns unchecked other than a Needle, they're going to find something explosive. You Needle a Karn, they're going to end up, wheeling into something explosive, or find a Sai, or, Narset into something devastating. It's just, Urza is going to start spinning multiple times. Like, it's just, they're going to find a way to do something devastating unless we're either killing them extremely fast or attacking their hand with follow-up disruption or attacking their hand with a combo. So like a turn 3 combo is fine if we have a couple of pieces of interaction in front of it. Just by itself, I don't think it's good enough. So before we start game 2, real quick, I think it's worth going over how I personally sideboard for the matchup. So for Turbo Shells and Rainbow Shells in this case, I bring in whatever number of Decays and Force of Vigors you have on the board. Those are good for obvious reasons. You can blow out their mana sources early, or if they get a Karn into bridge, you can get rid of the bridge. Even if they have like a Sai, if they have a couple of Thopters, Force of Vigor can move those out of the way. Decay can remove Emery, Sai, Narset, a number of other problematic permanents. So they're just all around good. Collector Oof is outstanding versus this deck. This deck has 13 mana sources that Oof doesn't shut down because of the roughly 17 lands 17 or 18 lands, I forget the exact number. Oof shuts off all of the Seat of the Synods, on top of all the petals, all the Mox Opals. The baubles get shut down. It's just, it's a devastating card in this matchup. So the Oof comes in every time. I bring in Caracas. I think between one of the ways we can beat a resolved Sai on the draw, or just in general if it comes down early before we can get it, is to bounce it with Caracas and make them invest most of their mana every turn and bringing it back down, or even better, if we can bounce it with Caracas and then cast a discard spell to take it. So that's a line. Plus, you can also use it on Emery. Emery is a little bit riskier because while you can bounce it every single turn, you're giving them 4 looks every recast at Echo of Eons. So depending on the composition of your hand and the board state, you may not necessarily want to be making that play unless you see that they have a couple stuck in hand or they've already been through 1 or 2. But sometimes you just have to do what you have to do. They might have a devastating artifact, an LED or something that we just can't afford to let them bring back, and Caracas on Emery is sometimes the right play as well. And the other 2 cards I bring in are 2 Ley Lines of the Voids. Between the Echo lines in general, which is one of the strongest things the deck can do, it just shuts off Emery too. So if you're just shutting off 8 of their best cards for the entire game, it's worthwhile to bring a couple of copies in. Some versions of Karn do have a bounce spell or 2. I've seen Submerge, and obviously that doesn't do anything versus Leyline, but I have seen versions that play 1 to 2 copies of Echoing Truth. So they're not stone cold for those 8 cards versus Leyline, but it still does work. I mean, they can also try and get to the point where they're hard casting Echoes, but that's a different problem if they have 6+ mana and we're still not in a position to kill them. So for those cards that come in, the Decays, the Force of Vigor, the Oof, the Ley Lines, and Caracas, I generally take out 3 Not of This Worlds. If they are on this, a lot of the versions have no bounce. Some of them have Submerge. If they have Submerge, Not of This World doesn't do anything there. And some have like 1 to 2 copies of Echoing Truth. I just don't think it's worth having Not of This World. It's just for 1 to 2 copies that may not even be in the opponent's list. If it's like open deck lists or something, maybe that's a different story. But in general, the 3 Not of This Worlds come right out. The Stifles can do some things in this matchup. You can stifle a Karn activation, an Emery activation, the Emery trigger, a Sai activation, the Sack, or the Thopter. It's not particularly effective, and they're a Chalice deck, so it's always nice to be able to shave down on some of the ones to kind of like offset some of the vulnerability to that. From there, the last 2 cards is usually a Petal, just to kind of minimize our vulnerability to Karn, shutting them off. And whether or not you believe they have the Echoing Truth, you can cut either a second Petal or a Sujiri Step. If you are in an open decklist situation, or you just don't want to play around it or don't think they have it, you can remove the step instead of the second Petal. So for game 2, so this is kind of the perfect hand of what I was talking about earlier, in that it's got 1 minor piece of interaction and a slowish combo. So there's no way to actually cast this Sylvan Scrying before making our second land drop without using the Petal. So the fastest way we could combo is to play the Scrying off of, say, Urborg and Petal, and then you have Urborg, Depths, Stage, grab the Stage, and then you have the 3-land combo on turn 3. But the only resistance we're offering up in that 3-turn window, and then we even need a 4th-turn attack. So they get 3 full turns, and the only resistance we're offering is a Needle. So I think this is a trap hand that they'll generally be able to win through. So I like to mulligan hands like this. So this hand doesn't have a clear path to the combo, but what it does have is 3 really strong ways to interact with what they have going on. So right off the bat, Leyline comes down. We don't have to worry about LED Echo. If they mulligan to LED Echo, they're in a lot of trouble. We have the Needle for Karn, so we don't have to worry about Karn whatsoever. So there's not going to be a Karn into Bridge. There's not going to be a Karn into Lattice or Sorcerer's Spyglass or anything. And then most importantly, we have a turn 1 Collector Roof with the Elvish Spirit Guide, which means they're going to be down to 13 mana sources in the entire deck. So it's entirely possible that between these 3 cards that they just can't do anything for the entire match. So I think this is an easy keep, even though there's no way to find or play depths. And we just bottom the redundant second legendary Herborg. So to start the game, we put the Leyline into play, and we play the Needle. Well, first the Oof and then the Needle on turn 2. So the Oof comes down. Opponent starts with Island into Bobble, Bobble, Petal, Opal. So, barring a bounce spell, Oof has done quite a bit of work. So, get the 2 points of damage in. And Needle Karn, just to make sure that one of their other really strong plays is taken care of. So the opponent draws for the turn and no longer wants to play Magic. So, which is completely understandable if the Island was their only non-artifact mana source. So you're going to see a lot of these kind of games in this matchup. They're going to have their games on the play where they just do their turn 1 thing and it's just devastating. They mill you into a nasty hand. They just have the turn 1 Karn like they did in game 1. They're just going to have their explosive hands, and what we have to do to combat that is when we have a chance, especially when we're on the play, we have to do devastating things too. So, like if you just look at their board state, not even knowing what the 4 cards were that they drew, they were going to very likely have an explosive turn 1. Like this could have just been turn 1 Narset, and then look at the top 4, get a card off Narset, and then draw 2 more cards off the Bobble, and then set up for another explosive turn 2, and you've just shut that down. So we're kind of just trying to do something equally devastating when we have the initiative, or at least disrupting them with this card. So that was game 2. So this is another hand that has its direct combo on turn 3, direct path to the combo on turn 3, and a piece of interaction. And on the surface, that seems kind of fine, but my experience in these matchups is that's just not good enough. So many things could go wrong in this sequence. If they have an explosive turn 1, we're just kind of sitting here, and we don't really have a way to react to it, and we can't stop anything they're doing, and we don't have a powerful turn 1 or turn 2 behind it, so they're just going to be able to follow up too. If they have a less explosive hand and they do something like Soul Land or land Petal into Chalice on 1, that also wrecks our hand. So most of the hands that they would keep are going to put us in really bad shape. And so even though this looks like this would be like a fairly stock keep game 1 in the dark versus anything, but in this matchup I just don't think this is the kind of hand that's good enough. So I ship this hand, and this hand, while similar to the first one, is just way more explosive. So we still have a turn 1 discard spell. We still kind of don't want to get chaliced, but the difference here is if they do chalice us, we at least have the Hex Mage behind it. So one of the strongest things you can do versus the Urza deck is remove the counter off of the Chalice with Vampire Hex Mage, which stops a lot of what they're trying to do. So if they have Emery recursion with one of the Bobbles, their own Chalice will counter all their zeros. So it stops them from playing additional LEDs, it stops them from playing additional Petals and Opals. So it really takes a lot of the air out of the deck if you can set up a scenario where they're not already a mile ahead and you can take a counter off of the Chalice with the Vampire Hex Mage. Also, if we don't get Chaliced, it's either discard spell into discard spell or discard spell into turn 2 combo if we don't get Chaliced by sacking the Gemstone Mine for depths and playing the Hex Mage. So we're threatening a really fast explosive kill and we have 2 to 3 pieces of disruption. We also have the Bazooka Bog, which is pretty relevant. A lot of their early turns will be something like Seed of the Synod, Artifact Mana, play Emery, and then try and get Emery going. So if they hit anything relevant, whether that's an Echo or an LED or something, a Bauble to start recurring with Emery, we can temporarily shut that line down by just playing a Bog too. So I think that being the extra piece of disruption is pretty key here. So in this case, I think the upside of having that is more important than the second discard spell. So I think the bottom here is actually the second discard spell. So the opponent does start with the Emery beginning with a Bauble in the graveyard. So we draw a Collector Oof. Play the Thoughtseize. So this sets up some really interesting decisions for turn 2. So the Thoughtseize sees Karn and Urza. And as strong as Urza is, Karn is always the problem card. Like, Urza's kind of difficult on its own right, but we have the fast combo to kind of put that into an awkward spot. And Karn is just a massive headache, and we don't want to be using our Hex Mage to kill Karn, so Karn's the easy take here over Urza. So here we see the opponent with the standard Emery double up on the Lotus Petal, so they're able to use that twice to get to 4 mana and play out their Urza. So we draw Mana Confluence. So here's kind of where like the fork in the road spot. So we could play a Collector Oof. The problem with that in this particular spot is that doesn't actually stop Urza's mana ability. So we're not going to be cutting them off of too much mana, since they can still use some of their other artifacts for mana. Basically, Urza's the effect doing the tapping and adding the blue, not the artifact itself. So even with an Oof in play, they're still going to be able to generate a decent amount of mana in this spot. And they only have one unknown card that they drew for the turn. So I think in these kind of spots, we just want to be cutting them off of draw steps. We don't want them to find another bomb off the top. So in this spot, even though Oof is one of the best cards in the matchup, I think we just want to threaten the kill. So the opponent drew Narset, took a look at the top 4. The answer wasn't there, or a devastating effect wasn't there, so we're able to take this particular match. So this next match was from the actual tournament portion of the Mana Traders event, not the qualifying part. This was from the actual tournament. So this was an open deck list event. So unlike a lot of times on Magic Online, I knew I was playing against the Urza Karn deck. So it makes mulligan decisions significantly more accurate when that's the case. So here, this hand looks kind of tempting. We have the ability to play a discard spell. We have an ability to scrying on turn 2 and set up a clean turn 3 Hexmage Depths. The issue is it's a little on the slow side. Inquisition also misses most of their best cards, so it's really good at snagging, say, a Sai or Emery, but the cards that really break the game open, especially Karn, Narset, like it hits Narset, but it misses Karn, it misses Urza, so it's good, not great, and the Not of This World just does not have text in this game. So I think it's a little soft, and I think we can do better on a random 6. So this hand is horrible. So this is a turn 3 if we don't use the stifle. And the stifle isn't particularly great either. So I think this was an easy mulligan. This, on the other hand, is an amazing keep. Part of the reason we're willing to mulligan so often in this matchup, and just in general, is this deck mulligans well. We're really just A plus B, and it's not hard to find A plus B on 5, 6, sometimes even 4. Like I've won games on 3 before. Obviously, it's less ideal the less you go down, but it's not really that unreasonable to have a fairly powerful 5-card hand with this deck. So here the decision is just we have a turn 1 combo with, or turn 1 20/20 with Petal, Petal, Depths, Hexmage. So that's 4 of the cards. So the question is just what do we keep with it? We're probably not casting the Thoughtseize, so we can't really keep that. So it's basically Urborg versus Spirit Guide. The Spirit Guide doesn't really get us anywhere, because even if we drew a crop rotation, we're not going to have the only land we would have is the Depths. So if we use the Hexmage, even if we drew a crop rotation, we wouldn't be able to do anything with the guide. So I think we just keep the extra land in case something goes wrong. That's a slightly better foundation point for moving forward. So say they did bring in, well, this is game 1, but if this was like post board and they did bring in Force of Will, we'd be live to draw either a stage or a second Hexmage. Or just in this case, we're worried about something randomly and we draw a discard spell we could cast the next turn. Say if they get out a fast Psy and a blocker for a turn, this could allow us to cast a discard spell on turn 2. So they can't beat a turn 1 20/20, which very very few decks can. I guess that's not true, but in this matchup, that's usually not something that they can beat. So game 2, same boarding strategy with the Decays, Force of Vigor, Oof, Leylines, Crocus, for the Not of This World, Stifles, and Step Pedal. This hand has no path to the combo and just a couple of needles. That's an easy mulligan. This hand is even worse with both Leylines and no path to the combo at all. This hand cannot cast anything. We are on the draw, so maybe you could try and convince yourself that Urborg's coming off the top, or a green source is coming off the top, and we could crop rotate into Urborg, cast a discard spell, cast a Hexmage. But if it doesn't come in the first turn, or like the first turn, I guess you could play the Depths and pray it comes in the second turn. But so many things could go wrong. You just miss a land drop for 2 turns and we just lose. They could just chalice on 1 and we likely just lose. I don't think you can keep this hand. So on 4, we're not going to be able to disrupt them, and it's kind of a cross your fingers kind of hand, but at least this is a turn 3 combo. So I think what we do here is we keep the Stage Depths, the Spirit Guide, and the Confluence, just so we have black mana in case we draw this card, and everything else hits the bottom. So this is the old, we have a turn 3 combo and we're going to hope nothing really bad happens. So the opponent's first turn is pretty explosive, but this does work sort of to our advantage, and that as far as their payoffs go for their explosive turn 1 hand, Urza is the least scary for us. So the opponent's going for the turn 1 spin. We get kind of lucky here. The spin hits basically nothing. The snow-covered island can't be played. So that worked out about as well as it possibly could have. So we just play the stage and pass. The reason to play the stage there, it's arguable that you could play the Depths, is from this situation they can't, they're not going to be able to echo us with just 1 draw step given their current board state. But against this deck in general, whenever we have a choice between playing any kind of lands, if there's no reason to represent mana or we don't need to cast anything with them, we always want to prioritize playing the depths or the stage, because at any moment we could get echoed. Knowing we don't have to play the depths here because we know we can't be echoed this turn, but generally if there's a possibility that we could get echoed, we want to get the combo pieces into play to make sure that doesn't happen. So since now it is a possibility, we definitely need to get the depths into play. So at the end of our turn, this was my actual first time seeing Hull Breacher cast. It's particularly the most devastating card against us, unless they're able to cast an Echo, but I can see it's going to cause a lot of headaches for people in the format. So the opponent crashed in for 6. That land drop I think is actually a mistake. I don't think we want to... We didn't necessarily have to show them that we 100% had the combo. It's likely to not matter given that they only have 1 card, but it could have been relevant, and keeping a little bit of hidden information would have been better there. So they spin with Urza and just hit a Chalice. And that basically ends the game. Not the most interesting match, but sometimes these go like that. So the next 2 that I have were significantly closer games. So in this spot, in game 1, lose the roll, so we're on the draw. This hand has no path to the combo, so I think this is relatively easy mulligan. This hand doesn't have a ton of disruption, but it is a turn 2 combo, so in game 1s I don't think we're really turning turn 2 combos down, so we bottom the redundant second gemstone mine. So the opponent Chalice is on 1, so our Stifle is a virtual mulligan. So Petal Bobble into Emery. Hitting some pretty good stuff, so they have options of multiple bobbles. They can recurve bobble if they want to draw cards. They have the LED if they draw into an Echo or something along those lines, and they also have the Lotus Petal. So Emery has quite a few good options here. So Duress was a dead draw for a couple of reasons. They used their entire hand, and Chalice is on 1. So it's entirely possible, given the LED in their graveyard, that they could just draw a Echo and mulligan us, so there's no reason not to play out our petals there, and we play the depths for the reason we discussed earlier, and that we want the most important combo pieces in play if we have a choice, if there's even a risk of us getting echoed, and they have 2 looks at it between the bobble and their draw step. So Emery brings back a bobble. pass. And draw a pretty bad stifle there. So we're kind of just all in on the 2020 and see what happens. Very similar to the last game of the last match. Worked out there, but sometimes we're just kind of at the mercy. So the opponent found a Psy. So sometimes Psy is beatable in a variety of ways, whether bounce with Caracas and into discard or needle their recursion engine. But when they have an unchecked recursion engine like they do here with Emery, that's just going to be a problem. We don't have main deck decay, so we can't get the Psy off the table. The Caracas is also on the sideboard, so this is kind of just here. And with an active Emery, we're just never going to be able to push through that. So I scooped in this spot. The one out that we could have if they didn't also have the Chalice is we could draw Needle and Needle Emery, which would at least shut off the flow of cards, and then we could make a 2020 and just try to just the abyss them through the Psy and their draw steps. The issue is we can't even do that with the Chalice on board. So we would kind of need to draw a Hex Mage, get rid of the counter off the Chalice, then draw a Needle to shut off the Emery, and then combo through however many Thopters are sitting. So life EV decision that the likelihood of those draws before they found something off of this Bobble engine to kill us was to scoop there. If you wanted to play it out to see if you find some of that over the next couple of turns, I wouldn't fault you. I just did not choose to in that spot. So this hand doesn't look great on its face, but it has a path to the combo, has 2 black sources, has the Sylvan Scrying, has the Hex Mage, and it's got 2 very good pieces of disruption. Besides Psy, the cards that I'm most worried about are the Echo lines, whether that's with Hullbreacher or Narset, and Karn into cards that we just can't answer, like that just locks out the game immediately unless, or we're just drawing to a handful of removal spells to get rid of, like Bridge. So the fact that we can answer both of those, 2 of the 3 biggest threats, and Psy's only at 2 of, so I think this is, it doesn't look great, but I think it's keepable. So amusingly enough, I clicked on the wrong Karn. So that's something to always be aware of with these planeswalkers that have multiple versions, is make sure it's Great Creator. Don't be like me with that play. So the opponent island goes. So the Compliments is a pretty good draw there because we don't have to slow down our combo by either playing Bog, which slows us down a turn, or playing Wasteland, which slows us down a turn by not having an extra second black. So that was a pretty good pickup. So we scrying for the depths and pass back. So the opponent has a turn 2 Narset off of the Lotus Petal, which is pretty good. They reveal a Mox Opal. Not much of a decision here. We only have the one line. Just put the combo into play and force them to have something. End of our turn, they crack the Bobble. It is worth keeping track of. A lot of times I don't necessarily do it either, and I forgot to check in earlier games when we were talking about it. But it is worth checking your revealed pile if you don't see it pop up on the screen when it happens, to see what they're actually aware of. So in this case, the Bobble revealed Bazooka Bog. So our friend Sai is back. So here come the reigning zeros to make some flyers in the form of Opal and Bobble. Narset reveals a Lotus Petal. So they're able to create 3 flyers right off the bat. So they're already out of Force of Vigor range, and Decay would be pointed at Sai anyway. So it's going to take us a little bit of time to try and work through this. We don't really have a choice though, we have to go the long way. We don't have any tools to do anything else. So we make the 20/20 at the end of their turn. The Collector Roof is a great draw. It's going to constrain their mana on future turns. It also allows us, in this case, to leverage our Wasteland a little bit. The Wasteland was looking kind of weak in the face of, Mox Opal and Petal, so they were going to be able to play their 4-drops even if we Wastelanded Tomb. But now with the Oof shutting off a couple of their mana sources, it's going to constrain what they can do a little bit, especially with Sai being able to sacrifice things and draw additional cards. So from here we just crash in, get the first Thopter off the board. So this is going to be a pretty consistent thing. Unless we can remove Sai or Needle Sai, the block and sack is always going to be something that they're interested in doing. So in this case, they got rid of the second Thopter, which is pretty good for us. It's likely that they're going to keep making Thopters, but it's one less thing that we have to deal with. So we play the Wasteland, get rid of their Soul Land, and play the Oof. So Bobble comes down, gets an extra Thopter. They sacrifice a couple of their useless artifacts in Opal and Bobble that Oof is shutting down to draw another card. Play another Opal and hit us for 1. So we draw another Dark Depths. Getting into play seems fine. One of the things we are going to be able to do is set up a scenario where we can attack in and have the threat of another 20/20 right behind it. So that might prevent them from getting some chip damage in with their extra Thopters, which is nice. So they draw and pass back. Here we'll just crash in again, play the stage so that we have what we were talking about and the threat of being able to kill them. Or not kill them, threat of being able to kill an incoming flyer to at least preserve our life total a little bit. So they block and get rid of another shut off Opal and the Thopter the block to draw another card. We play this step. So the only thing that's saving us from this particular state is that their mana is really constrained. So LED comes down for another Thopter. We draw a redundant 4th Dark Depths, so not going to be able to draw any more of those. The opponent got up to so many cards that they had to discard twice. Karn and Echo were the discards. So you can see the hate pieces are doing a lot of work. Like they just can't get to the necessary mana, they probably have at least an additional copy of Karn in their hand, and the Echo, there's nowhere near casting the Echo hard, and the graveyard is shut off, so they're just kind of in an interesting spot. So the Decay is a great draw, so we could go for the win here. The issue is if they do have a bounce spell, that kind of just blows us out to a certain degree. I think it's just overall safer to just force them to block and force them to take an action. And then if nothing happens and they just chump block, we can use the Decay on their upkeep and get rid of the Sigh. So it turns out that this player does have Echoing Truth. In this case, they go after the Leyline. I'm not 100% sure what that means. It probably means they're hoping to be able to go for an Echo of Eons next turn. But either way, we're not going to give them another shot with the Sigh, so we're going to use the Decay on the Sigh in response. So they play an island and they scoop in that spot. A little bit fortunate. The oof off the top in a really key spot, I'm pretty sure they would have just absolutely crushed us if that didn't come, because they saw a number of additional artifacts, including the LED and the Echo, so they would have been able to draw into a hand once they found with what they had last turn if the oof wasn't present. So I don't know when they drew those specific cards, but it was pretty fortunate for us to have found the oof. So since most of these went pretty fast, I played another game tonight. Haven't really had a chance to go through this one much, but since this one's a little shorter than the other videos, I'll just go through it really quick. So we won the draw. So not knowing what the opponent's on, I kind of broke my own rule here. I kept a hand that has no path to the combo, which I generally advise against. I think because I had 4 pieces of disruption / protection, it kind of like drew me in a little bit. But I generally do not like keeping hands that don't have depths or a way to find depths, but did so here. So the opponent's on a mulligan to 5. We once again see Sigh. So here we have no choice. We just take one of the 2 Lotus Petals. We're just gonna have to deal with the consequences of Sigh. So Island comes down. We don't draw a discard spell like an Inquisition or a Thoughtseize that could have taken it. So we're kind of just where we are here. Play out a stage and pass back. Here comes our good friend Sigh again into the Lotus Petal, making a Thopter. Seize comes off the top, 1 turn too late here. So we're able to take a Chalice at least to give us draws to crop rotation. They don't really have a lot going on. They just have the island. So they play the island and crush in for 1. We draw another stage, which we can play out. So at least we're sort of threatening crop rotation here. Karn comes down. So they activate Karn here, and we have the choice between stifling or not stifling. They have 1 unknown card, which was their draw step from basically last turn, because there's no way they had Karn last turn. They would have played it. So one unknown that they chose not to play the previous turn. So could be another land. It could be, something expensive. But my thinking here is to let this resolve, and hopefully they get something like LED, and then next turn they try to go for Lattice, and we can stifle that activation. And then that buys us 2 to 3 draw steps to try and find a Needle or a Hex Mage or something, crop rotation, something to try and kill them before they're able to do something devastating. Might be greedy, but that was what I was shooting for. I didn't think it was super high probability that we would get max punished by this, but they did get the LED. However, they also had the other draw from last turn was Echo, so that was a pretty big punish. This particular hand does have the depths, but doesn't have any disruption or any way to really work through the Sai. So at this point in the game, there's just likely no coming back. We could try to play the Karn, or try to play the Hex Mage and kill the Karn, but they just have so many Thopters at this point, and they have another 4 cards in hand, so I just elect to scoop from this spot. So for game 2, same boarding strategy as all the other matchups, or all the other matches, I should say. This is a really slow hand. Turn 4 combo and just 2 Needles. I don't think that's good enough in this matchup. This hand is missing 1 piece of mana, but it has 3 pieces of disruption and has the 2 combo pieces. So I think that's pretty standard keep. We're likely not casting the Hex Mage, so even though it is really valuable in the matchup for Karn headaches and Chalice headaches, we're on the play, so we're going to be able to play Duress under Chalice. We have the Needles, so we're going to be able to hopefully Needle Karn, and we have the Leyline for their explosive graveyard starts. So I think the Hex Mage is the clear bottom here. So we need all the Karn. Hope is to not have to use the Duress and just be able to turn 3 them, or ideally draw Black Source on turn 2 and be able to. So they do have the Chalice on 1, which shuts off the Duress, but that's kind of fine. Hex Mage is a really bad draw. We're really just looking for any mana source. So we play the Depths and ship it back. They play an island and pass it back. We do draw a mana source, which is a stage. So we play stage and pass it back. They flash in Hull Breacher at the end of turn. So luckily we have the Leyline in, so it's unlikely they're going to be able to hardcast Echo here. So Karn comes down. So this is a super interesting attack by the opponent. So my initial reaction was that I was just going to block, eat the Hull Breacher, and swing back and kill them. But the Urza actually gives them exactly 2 blue mana, so they could easily have an Echoing Truth here. So the decision to combo or not combo really comes down to whether or not I believe the opponent has the Echoing Truth. We could try to top deck another land. Any mana source that's not a dark, any land or mana source that's not a Dark Depths means that we could use the Petal to cast Duress, which would clear out a theoretical Echoing Truth. But that's probably generally speaking, with what's left in the deck, it's a little over a third of the deck, maybe like 40% of the deck. So once you exclude the depths. So basically, I think it's right to just call it from here since it's only a 1 or a 2 of. If their board state was a little bit different, maybe I would have been inclined to wait and try and draw the mana. But the problem is that with Urza in play, they're untapping with a minimum of 6 mana, and any zeros that they have are additional mana. So they're just going to be able to just do whatever. They could just easily, even with this board as is, hard cast an Echo of Eons next turn, which is just going to completely blow us out, and they would get Hull Breacher, treasures, and everything else. So at the end of the day, I think given what their board would look like if I give them an additional untap step, I think it was worth it. That if we lose to Echoing Truth, we lose to Echoing Truth. So they did the the Moto bluff of add 2 to the mana pool before conceding, and like waiting a few seconds before conceding, which I always appreciate. If you're playing, you might as well give your opponent a little bit of a scare. And I did tank for a little bit on their end step before actually going for it, so I think it was definitely appropriate for them to do that in that spot. So for game 3, we're on the draw. This hand doesn't look explosive because it's not explosive. It's at turn 4, given the way it is constructed currently. But we do get a seize on 1 if they don't chalice. We also have Force of Vigor and Decay, so we're not going to get smoked by, or we're unlikely to get smoked by Sai or Karn into Bridge or anything like that. And depending on what their mana situation looks like, Force of Vigor might just be able to blow them out. So I think this is a fine keep. So the opponent's on the familiar Seat Petal Emery opening. Card of note they'll be able to recur is Mox Opal, which they already have 2 artifacts for. So this definitely, Emery being in play definitely takes the shine out of trying to constrain their mana with Force of Vigor when they can just bring back anything that we destroy. So the Elvish Spirit Guide's a nice pickup. That takes us from a turn 3 combo, or turn 4 combo to a turn 3 combo. So the extra speed's appreciated. Here we get the Lightning Bolt ourselves. Always a fun start. Luckily, it's not particularly relevant in this matchup. So here we get the choice of Karn versus the Echo Blowout if they find one, having the full Hull Breacher and LED. Given that they can just cast Karn next turn, that's just too strong, I think, to allow that to happen. So I think Karn has to go, and we kind of just have to cross our fingers that they're not able to find an Echo of Eons. So we take the Karn there, pass it back. So Emery brings back Opal. Opal comes into play, LED comes into play, and they pass it back. So we draw a second Decay. We're probably not going to need that one with the way this game's going. They're either going to find an Echo and get rid of all of our removal, or we're going to kill them. So we tutor up the depths, pass it back. End of our turn, they flash in the Hull Breacher. So this was the turn we really needed to fade it. They might be able to do something devastating next turn if they find it, but in this particular turn, losing our entire hand would have been catastrophic. So just the one unknown. We're definitely not Caracasing back Emery when they're looking for an Echo of Eons, and obviously it's just better to keep up the combo. So we could upkeep Force of Vigor to shave their mana production, but they just have so much. Like right now they're looking at 9 on board, and Emery brings it back to 12, so there's just really, if we hit, say, the LAD and the seat, yeah, they still get to bring the LAD back, so we're not really doing too big of a number on their mana, so I just elected that it's just better to let that go. So here they swing in. We could eat the Hull Breacher in that spot, but I think it's very likely that they're going to Echo behind it. I think they would have done that before risking swinging in. It's possible they have a Force of Will in this spot. But I think it's just better to conceal the information and go off on their end step. So we go for it, and they don't have anything. So just kind of fortunate. If they hit it over the course of those 3 draw steps, we're just likely going to lose. They just didn't, and there's just a lot of redraws that could have gotten them there. Like any Narset could find, like they could play the Narset into it. The second Emery, they could play the second Emery and get into it. I think we have Karn beat from this spot, but a lot of the other lines that lead to the Echo would have gotten there. So that's kind of the games that I had available. Again, it's unfortunate with the Magic Online reinstall that some of the better games weren't available at the moment. But hopefully over the next few weeks, I'll have some good matchups and versus some other style decks again. Maybe some decent ones in the mirror. I have some slightly different stuff coming up. I'm gonna do a 1-game review with XJ Cloud of one of the matches I played on stream during the Mana Traders event, so we can go through it, and not only will I discuss my thought process and what I was thinking from my side, but get his take on that and get his take on the decisions the D&T player made as well, and between the two of us try to cobble together what would have happened if everybody had played perfectly on both sides. I know from already like doing a brief glance through of my play in the game in question, there was definitely at least one decision point I think I would do differently if I could do it over again. So it'll be interesting to go through that and get his take on that. And also Whitefaces is going to do a matchup series, so we'll actually get some gameplay of a head-to-head series, to be determined what deck he's going to be on. He's an incredibly talented Legacy player and has chops with a number of different decks, so we're gonna try and come up with what the best deck for him to play is and do a little exhibition series for some head-to-head matchups so we can get some analysis that way. But for now, we're a little over an hour, so I think I'm going to stop, and hopefully you guys, or everyone, found something interesting, or was at least mildly entertained. So until next time, take it easy.